The early 2000s was a very interesting time to be a Godzilla fan. For the first time in the US, we were seeing the release of the original Japanese films on the still relatively new DVD format, or I should say, newly accessible, as well as the release of the Millennium films, that being the era of Godzilla films from 1999 to 2004. From Godzilla 2000 through Final Wars. Western audiences also had a newfound interest with the 1998 Hollywood Godzilla, which, while is debated among fans, it's undeniable that it did play a role in introducing the famous film figure to a new generation. So Godzilla was really popping off in popularity. I wouldn't say at its height, but it was definitely doing something for Western audiences, even though these later films weren't getting theatrical releases because of box office numbers. They were doing well in the DVD department. And I might add that these international releases were happening far faster than what we were accustomed to over here. And in 2002, alongside the release of Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, we had a new Godzilla video game unlike anything fans had seen before. As I briefly discussed in my previous video, Godzilla games have a strange history dating back to 1983. Many were limited to their tech of the time, while others were actually pretty damn impressive. A lot of those didn't even make it outside of Japan though. And then we had Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, as not to be confused with the film Destroy All Monsters. This was a 3D fighting game based on the popular kaiju characters under Toho, and the first of a trilogy by Pipeworks Studios, all published under Atari. These were the first Godzilla games to really actualize the dreams of G fans, allowing them to play as their favorite giant monsters, fight other kaiju, and cause mayhem at the same time. It's been well over 20 years since the earliest entry in this series, so now the question is, how well did these games hold up? Are they deserving of a remaster? Or should we just move on to something new? Let's just see how much our nostalgia and love for Godzilla has blinded our perspective on these games. The first entry, as aforementioned, was Destroy All Monsters Melee, which originally was a GameCube exclusive. GameCube was late to the party in comparison to Sony's PS2. The ultimate multimedia gaming console that could play PS1 games through backwards compatibility, new PS2 games, and perhaps most importantly, it could play DVDs. And for a lot of us, it was our first DVD player. Many people underestimated the GameCube for its unique approach, mostly lacking in those multimedia options, but certainly made up for it with its gaming. It may not have been able to play DVDs, but it was a powerhouse when it came to being a gaming console. Going in hard too with incredible launch titles and exclusives. One of those early exclusives being Destroy All Monsters Melee, or DAM for short. The game would be later ported, but we'll talk about that in a bit. The game opens with a very early 2000s, but still rather impressive opening cinematic. Ooh. It showcases Millennium Godzilla and some other kaiju in a relatively limited roster with some military action. And then we get to the menu, and we have several modes to look at here. The first is Versus. At the very beginning, we have 3 kaiju to choose from. Heisei Godzilla, interesting, Megalon, okay, and Anguirus. Well, I think everyone knows who we're going to be starting with. Versus is your basic battle mode. Here we can get an idea of the controls and peek at the roster. Adding on from the ones we already pointed out, there's also Godzilla 2000, Rodan, Destroya, Gigan, Ghidorah, and Mecha Ghidorah, and the Heisei Mechagodzilla, as well as a special unlockable, which is Orga. There's not really a tutorial here, so I went into Versus hoping to get a good grasp of the game. Fight! Yeah, the AI tore right into me before I could even figure out my buttons. The controls are pretty simple though. You got a punch, a kick, a special, which in Godzilla's case is his tail, a block, and the bumpers are used for jumping and dashing. And the Z button is for your beams. All in all, once you get a handle on it, it plays smooth as butter with a GameCube controller. although I do wonder how it's gonna feel when we move on to the Xbox. It definitely feels like a fighting game made for this controller in mind. For 2002, the graphics aren't too shabby either. The textures are pretty decent, the buildings look okay, the maps and the terrain are fine, but it's all destructible and that's what really makes it fun. The maps are all based on real big cities around the world too, which is pretty cool. There's also item pickups like in Smash, such as this rage thing, which I think is supposed to make you stronger. It doesn't feel like it. Now the game does have a sort of story mode. I must admit, I wasn't expecting a whole cutscene here. It's pretty cute. You got this alien guy talking about how shitty humans are and we're gonna be slaves to them now, and the monsters are fighting. The story mode isn't super long or intricate, as the character roster in the game isn't super large. I will say one thing about this game. It's probably the most difficult of the three. I enjoy fighting games myself, although I'm not the best at them, but the AI on this one was pretty aggressive. But I was also unfamiliar with this and still learning the controls. Although really my only big issue here is recoveries. There's not a whole lot of time to get your ass up before the enemy kaiju keeps ganging up on you. There may also be a bit of a balancing issue here. Enemies like Ghidorah and Gigan made me feel like I actually had to try when fighting them. But then I faced off against Rodan halfway through the story and absolutely decimated him. Even Angerus put up more of a fight than Rodan did. And then I have to fight Destroya afterwards? He keeps cheesing me with this damn unicorn horn of his. Oh, that's unfortunate. After burning through the roster, you unlock another cutscene where the aliens deem you badass enough to face off against their super kaiju.
And now we will see who is king of the monsters.
Oh, you shouldn't have said that. And it's... Heisei Mecha Godzilla. Alright. Punching him feels like hitting a brick wall, but still surprisingly not too difficult. And in under 20 minutes, we've cleared the story for the first time. And by doing so, we've unlocked Millennium Godzilla, which means we still have all of the primary roster to unlock and the secret character, which is Orga. In case you're wondering, there's no real difference in the two Godzillas, it's mostly cosmetic. Although Godzilla 2000 does feel faster to play, his damage output is the same. So to unlock monsters in this game, you basically have to beat the story over and over again using other kaiju in the game. Or you could just use cheat codes. Take that, little Ghidorah. In terms of other game modes, there's survival, which, as the title implies, you survive against waves of enemies. And there's also tons of multiplayer modes, including team battles and a destruction mode where you go around getting points for destroying the environment. There's also a gallery. Damn may be a small game, but it's definitely full of hours of fun. It's the type of game where you want to invite some friends over, order a couple pizzas, and just have a good time. It's actually kind of relaxing in that mindset. I think it's a really cool game, but I'm not quite sure if it lives up to that price tag. A complete in-box of this game will set you around $80 to $90. Not too surprising given the fact that it is a GameCube game, but I don't really see it living up to that price tag. Although, who am I kidding? Most of you guys are going to emulate this anyway. Now, the game did have some ports, however, both on the Game Boy Advance and the Xbox. The Game Boy version is more of a companion game than it is a port. It's definitely beautiful in its own Game Boy way. It actually has its own story mode too, and Mothra, which is interesting since Mothra didn't make it to the console versions. This game's story is told to us by the reporter, Connie Matsu, who looks like she's going to sign us up for the Battle Royale program. A meteorite is making the kaiju go crazy except for the one that you're playing, and you gotta knock some sense into them. I kinda lament not having this game as a kid. I think I would have loved it. Playing it now, it's not super impressive, but it is really damn neat for a Game Boy game. It's an incredibly simplified version of Dam, and you do get to fight the other monsters. It certainly has its own charm, and it may even be a gem in its own right. You can even do 4v4 battles with your friends using link cables. Moving on, lastly, the game was also released on the Xbox a year later, which might be the ideal way of owning the game. It has extra content, upscaled graphics. Yeah, this might be the better version. The graphics aren't that much different from the GameCube, although Godzilla's beams look much better here. The controls feel so much more responsive. It feels far less clunky than on the GameCube. I gotta give credit where credit is due. In terms of performance and content, the Xbox version is just superior. You get a new kaiju to play, Kiryu, the third Mechagodzilla, who was still pretty new at this time when the game came out. In fact, Kiryu was in the Japanese release for DAM, but not in the North American release on the GameCube because the movie hadn't been released yet here. The Xbox version gave us both Heisei and Kiryu Mecha Gs. And I'm not dissing the GameCube version, which is still incredibly impressive for what it is, but I just had so much more fun with the Xbox version. Yet another reason of my child self to be jealous of not having this console growing up. Still, DAM is a really fun game, and a great first step in the right direction for Godzilla video games. Now, let's see where the next step takes us in Save the Earth. The year was 2004, releasing towards the end of the year at the same time as Final Wars was coming out. So of course, that's the big deal with this game, and it does have its share of Final Wars promotions. This was really the last big year for Godzilla for a while. 2004 marked the 50th anniversary for the Big G, and Toho intended Final Wars to be his final send-off. For a while, at least. And that held true for 10 years.
Godzilla!
It was an exciting time for Godzilla fans, and the perfect time for a new game. Godzilla Save the Earth essentially is a sequel to our previous Destroy All Monsters Melee. This game was released for the PS2 and Xbox. Interestingly, not for the GameCube. Not quite sure why that was. Even while the Xbox version of DAM felt superior to the GameCube version, the GameCube one sold so much better and had that console exclusive advantage for a bit. Apparently, there were issues with Atari and Nintendo. That and the GameCube lacked the ability to play online. I don't know for sure, it's a lot of hearsay, but it definitely wasn't the smartest move to not have the system included. There's no real big difference between Xbox and PS2, no console exclusives or anything like that. Although if you do own an Xbox copy, you can play it through backwards compatibility on your Xbox 360, which is pretty neat. Now this game I had on the PS2 myself, and the only one of the trilogy that I personally owned instead of rented. So I do have pretty good memories with this game. But it's been a while since I played it, let's see if it holds up. The game also has a slight story mode continuing from the previous. The same aliens are back this time with their queen now, who has a little bit more personality, even if she is mostly just the Wicked Witch from Oz.
Fly, my pretties.
She wants Godzilla's cells and is sending the alien-based kaiju after him, which also results in fighting the other monsters too. The gameplay may look identical at first, although the textures seem to have taken a bit of a hit. The game actually does feel a little more sluggish than its predecessor, but it certainly runs smoother. The combat feels so much more refined, and it seems that they really worked on the balancing. A little bit. The AI is a little bit more nerfed, and it seems far more easier to play this go around. Look, they even made it to where Rodan did something in this version instead of just getting his ass beat. We got a whole bunch of new monsters in this game too. All 12 from the previous game are here, but there's also an additional 6. They include Baragon, Mogura, Megagyrus, Mothra, Jaga, and Space Godzilla. It would have been 7 as Biollante was already programmed for the game, but there was some time and some copyright issues and they just couldn't really fit her in there. Don't worry though, we'll see her soon. Something new in the story this time also are mini-games. Like this one where you have to destroy UFOs protecting his tower. You shoot your atomic breath at them, but that's limited, so you can also just throw a whole fucking building at them. There we go. There's also one in here that's like destruction mode from the previous game, but tweaked a little bit. Not quite as good as destroying stuff in the PS4 game, but it's a nice middle ground, especially since this game's focus is combat. Look, you can even see the people running out of the buildings. There's loads of other mini games too, like Kaiju Bowling, which is really more like dodgeball. There's a lot here. There's this underwater one that has an Ebra appearance, or this one where you had to fight the tripod from War of the Worlds. Ah, there she is. The queen herself finally gets to be on the main roster. Now Mothra has a really cool gimmick here. You start the fight in the larva form for a bit, and then bam, she does a whole transformation on us. I didn't expect that from this game, but nice touch. Man, these games really gave Orga way more screen time than Toho ever did, huh? No, I beat it. I didn't even realize we were that far into it. Turns out there is an ending cutscene, but you have to beat the game on hard mode to unlock it. At first, I was told you have to win using Godzilla twice, but that was not the case in fact. Winning on hard mode unlocked a secret boss against Space Godzilla. Interesting choice, resulting in a short little cutscene, which is a bit more of a conclusion. Outside of the normal modes, there's also Melee, with its different game modes from team battles to free-for-all. There's survival again, and an option to pick your favorite minigames that you've unlocked. Most interesting is that this game actually had online play available, as I mentioned before. Again, I can assume this is another reason why it didn't make it to the GameCube, but I can't imagine that being a major hindrance. I'm sure they could have still ported the game without that feature after all. And at this time, online gameplay was still pretty awful anyway. All in all, Save the Earth is just a far superior version of Destroy All Monsters Melee in every aspect. A better arcade mode, more fleshed out combat, more content, more characters, mini games, just about everything here is better in every aspect. And no disrespect to Destroy All Monsters, as it's still a great game for what it is. But Save the Earth does what a great sequel is supposed to do. It improves on the original. So we should be happy that this is better than the first one. Unfortunately, I don't really think I can say the same about the next game. The final game of the trilogy is perhaps the most interesting. Godzilla Unleashed, released in 2007 on the PS2, the Wii, and the DS. This time, it was the Xbox that got shafted in the port department, which is kind of crazy because Xbox could have been the only console to have all 3 games on it. There was also a PSP port in development, but that got cancelled. And this was a year where there was no Godzilla movies or content coming out, so it was pretty cool to see a new game. Godzilla Unleashed was at its heart developed for the Wii. It was made with the Wii controls in mind, and is probably also why that version has the most content. And that's why it's the version we'll be focusing on. And forgive the quality as we are filming this on the official hardware. This game does not have an opening cinematic like the previous ones, or rather it has this action montage showcasing all the monsters. It's pretty neat, and this theme is definitely iconic. We can see immediately from the main menu that there are less options available to us compared to the other games. Training, which is new, Brawl, and Story. The craziest thing to me is that this game actually has a Japanese audio setting. Why not? By the way, if you do play this game in Japanese audio, the subtitles are aggressively off sync. Let's check out Training to get an idea of these motion controls. Ah, shit. Yeah, not letting us be able to use a GameCube controller for this is a major downside. The story mode opens with these slideshow cutscenes. The artwork is pretty nice, and it's got this comic manga style going on here. It's definitely a lot more involved this time, and I can't really imagine too many people playing this game are really that invested in it. I think they just want to get into the monster fights. This story takes place about 20 years after Save the Earth. Would you believe me if I said that a meteorite was another issue here? Well, it's a whole shower this time, which totally won't be the aliens from the previous 2 games. It's pissing the kaiju off and having them act up like Destroy All Monsters again. Also, here's Shiragami from Biollante. I guess he's alive now. I'm pretty sure he got shot and died. The first mission has us on Monster Island, now in a free roam format. The story implemented these crystals that are causing climate shifts all around the world. I guess they felt the need to make something spicy happening since the last 2 games were pretty much the same thing. We have to free our allies, Rodan and Anguirus, and then escape the island. The AI seems to be struggling here. Finally, a monster fight. The motion controls are not very responsive, at least not when I'm trying to do a combo. And I like the Wii, by the way. I enjoy the Wii as a console. There are times when the Wii remotes work, and then there are times when it's a gimmick. This is definitely a gimmick. Alright, fuck this. I'm going to the PS2 version. It may have less content, but at least I can play a fighting game with a proper controller. Oh! This is not much better. The PS2 version, somehow interestingly enough, feels far more clunky, even when a lot of it is just reskinning from the previous game. Even the jumping doesn't feel right. Okay, we're going back to the Wii version. The next stage has us going around in a frozen Sydney, destroying these crystal towers that look like they belong in Lord of the Rings. I gotta say, I really do feel like a jackass shaking my controller around trying to do all these combos. I am appreciative of the efforts to try and do something different. I feel like there's immense potential in reworking the maps and having multiple monsters on the field at once, but my god, does it suck trying to play this damn game. Would it really have hurt them to let us just plug in a GameCube controller like other fighting games on the Wii would? And as I said before, the story mode, while having a more fleshed out lore, just isn't super interesting. And it's still somewhat the same format as the previous two games, but now just with extra steps. What is interesting, however, depending on what faction your monster is a part of, determines the ending. There are 4 possible endings you can actually get in this game. It just doesn't hold me like the previous two. Now, the major highlight of this game is the character roster. There are a total of 26 kaiju to pick in the Wii version, which alone obviously makes it the superior version. There are several returning kaiju as well as new ones. Now we've got Showa Godzilla, meaning that 3 of the kaiju here are just different reskins for Godzilla, and yes, this one is a Wii exclusive. There's King Caesar, friggin' Varan, Showa Mechagodzilla, another Wii exclusive, alongside the other 2 versions of Mechagodzilla, which is pretty neat that you can play all of them. And we finally got Biollante, also a Wii exclusive. God damn. We got Titanosaurus from Terror of Mechagodzilla. That's just... what a wild pull. There are also 2 OC kaijus that were made just for the game. Apparently part of a fan submission or something like that. There's Obsidius and Crystalak, both of which look like they could have been a Ben 10 alien. It is actually interesting that the PS2 version has its own exclusive kaiju too. Batra. It's just a Mothra reskin, but it's something neat. Several other monsters were considered too, like Hedorah, the Hollywoodzilla, or even King Kong, but none of them made the cut either due to time or legal issues. The Wii version definitely has a lot more content and play modes in it. Frankly, the PS2 version is just far too buggy to really get far with. Even with as clunky as the Wii version is, the PS2 version just is not on par, sadly. While we're at it, let's go ahead and take a peek at the portable release on the Nintendo DS. Oh, that's a shame. I think it goes without saying that Unleashed is the weakest link of the trilogy. You may be able to argue Destroy All Monsters Melee for that, but I feel like that game was just more fun. I probably would have loved Unleashed as a kid if I had it back then, but I have no nostalgic lens to really give compliments here. And while it does have a killer monster catalog, it doesn't really help when the gameplay isn't that good. It also kind of feels like the game isn't complete. It definitely could have benefited having a little bit more time to tweak it. I think it could have been just a much better game. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely not the worst Godzilla game out there by any means, but it's not one of the best either. And given that it was the most recent entry on the list, that's a real shame. Destroy All Monsters Melee is pretty clunky, but you definitely feel the love for the source material and the desire to make that kick-ass game to do something really innovative, and its issues do not outweigh the overall fun that that game offers, whereas Save the Earth is, well, the best one. It might not be as much of a party game as Destroy All Monsters Melee, but it does a better job at balancing solo gameplay and co-op. Online play is a nice option. It just takes everything that was great about Dam and refines it and adds so much more content. I mean, frankly, if we had Save the Earth with the Wii version of Unleashed's character roster, that might just be the Godzilla game. Unleashed was smart to try and do something different, so we don't have just another 2.0 situation, but some of those changes really just weren't for the better, and while it excels in content, it lacks in gameplay. Playing these games in 2025, I still had a hell of a blast. I would love to see these games get remastered, although it will never happen because of copyright. But with Godzilla being perhaps more popular than ever now, it's really surprising that we haven't gotten a new game. You might still be scared out these last 2 games. You know how Toho gets when their properties don't get the numbers that they want. I mean, sure, there's been some mobile stuff and some collabs like Fortnite, but I'm talking about an actual game. It would be dope to have something like the PS4 game, with its kaiju simulation meshed with the sweet combat gameplay of Save the Earth. Throw in a killer roster, even bigger than Unleashed? Oh yeah, I guarantee you'll get some money from Godzilla fans. But will we ever get that? Only time will tell. Let me know in the comments below which one of these games was your favorite, or if you have any special memories playing them. Be sure to follow my socials to keep up to date with my channel, and leave a like if you enjoyed this video, as it really helps my channel out a lot. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.